Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better days, squinting at the engine of the old Chevy that refused to cooperate. The late afternoon sun streamed through the garage windows, casting long shadows across the concrete. Floor littered with tools and spare parts. His phone buzzed on the workbench, the screen lighting up with yet another overdue bill notification. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. He ignored it, just like he'd ignored the 3 others that had come through that morning. The sound of sneakers squeaking against linoleum echoed from the back office where his 8-year-old son, Tommy, was supposedly doing homework but was more likely building elaborate fortresses out of the cardboard boxes Marcus used for storing engine parts. The familiar pang of guilt twisted in his chest as he glanced at the clock. 6:30. Another long day at the shop. Another evening where Tommy had spent more time alone than with his father. Marcus had inherited Peterson's auto repair from him. His grandfather, along with the mounting debt and dwindling customer base that came with it. The neighborhood had changed over the years. Chain stores and franchises pushing out the small businesses that had been the heartbeat of the community. For decades. Most days, Marcus felt like he was barely keeping his head above water, let alone providing the kind of life Tommy deserved. The bell above the front door chimed, and Marcus looked up, expecting to see Mrs. Rodriguez coming to pick up her Honda. Instead, a figure stood silhouetted against the fading daylight, hunched and unsteady. As his eyes adjusted, Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The girl couldn't have been more than 17, maybe 18 at most. Her face was a patchwork of healing burns, pink and angry scar tissue stretching across her left cheek and down her neck. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, revealing more scarring along her hairline. But it was her eyes that stopped Marcus cold. They held a kind of weariness that no teenager should ever have to carry, a depth of pain that spoke of experiences far beyond her years. She was pregnant, maybe 6 or 7 months along, and she clutched a worn duffel bag against her chest like it contained everything she owned in the world. Which, Marcus realized with a sinking heart, it probably did. The girl stepped further into the garage, her movements careful and deliberate, as if every step required conscious thought. Marcus set down his wrench and walked toward her, noting how she instinctively took a half-step back when he approached. Trust was clearly not something that came easily to her anymore. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice gentle, and his hands visible. He'd learned a thing or two about approaching skittish creatures during his years working with rescue animals at the local shelter, back when he'd had time for volunteer work. The girl's eyes darted around the garage, taking in the organized chaos of tools and parts, the certificates on the wall, the family photo of Marcus and Tommy that sat on his desk. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, hoarse as if she hadn't used it in days. "I'm looking for work," she said, her chin lifting slightly in defiance of the vulnerability her situation clearly represented. "I can clean, organize, answer phones. I'm good with numbers. I don't need much money, just enough." Marcus studied her face, seeing the determination beneath the fear, the pride struggling against desperation. There was something familiar about her, though. He couldn't place it. The burns were extensive but healing, suggesting the injury had happened months ago. Hospital scars, he realized. Professional treatment, which meant insurance, which meant family involvement at some point. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, as if even that simple piece of information was dangerous to share. "Sarah," she said finally. "Sarah Chun." The name triggered a memory, something he'd seen in the local paper months ago. A house fire on Maple Street. A teenage girl critical condition, parents killed. He'd read this story with the detached sympathy of someone whose own problems felt overwhelming enough without taking on the tragedies of strangers. Now looking at Sarah, those problems seemed suddenly insignificant. "Have you eaten today, Sarah?" Marcus asked. Her hand moved instinctively to her rounded belly, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. "I'm not looking for charity," she said, but the words lacked conviction. She was swaying slightly on her feet, and Marcus could see the exhaustion painted in the dark circles under her eyes. Tommy chose that moment to emerge from the back office, a cardboard crown perched askew on his sandy brown hair, and a toy sword fashioned from a paper towel tube, clutched in his small fist. He stopped short when he saw Sarah, his eyes widening not with fear or disgust at her scars, but with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Are you a pirate?" Tommy asked, completely serious. "Because you look like you've been in an epic battle. And that's really cool." Sarah blinked, clearly caught off guard. A tiny smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from her. "Something like that," she said softly. "Tommy," Marcus said, "why don't you go wash up for dinner? We'll be having a guest tonight." Sarah's eyes snapped to his, alarm flashing across her features. "I can't. I mean, I didn't ask for." "You asked for work," Marcus interrupted gently. "Well, I need someone to help me organize the inventory in the back room. It's a mess back there, and it's been driving me crazy for months. The job comes with dinner and a place to sleep tonight. We can discuss the details over food." For a moment, Sarah looked like she might bolt. Her grip tightened on the duffel bag, and Marcus could see her calculating distances to the door, escape routes, backup plans. But then Tommy piped up again. "Do you like mac and cheese? Dad makes the best mac and cheese in the whole world. He puts those little breadcrumbs on top and everything." The kindness in his son's voice, the casual acceptance, seemed to tip something inside Sarah. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she nodded once, quick and sharp. "Okay," she whispered. "Just for tonight." Marcus led them both toward the small apartment above the garage that had become their home after the divorce, when keeping the house had become financially impossible. It wasn't much: 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, a living room barely large enough for a couch and Tommy's toy boxes, but it was clean and warm and safe. Sarah's eyes took in everything with the careful assessment of someone who had learned not to take shelter for granted. While Marcus busied himself in the kitchen, Tommy appointed himself Sarah's official tour guide, chattering away about his school, his friends, his elaborate plans for a treehouse that would require, at least, 1,000,000 pieces of wood, maybe 2,000,000. Sarah listened with the kind of focused attention that most adults couldn't manage, asking questions that made Tommy beam with importance. "And this is where Dad keeps all the good snacks," Tommy was saying, pulling open a cabinet door. "He thinks. I don't know, but I totally know. Want some crackers? You look really hungry." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus glanced over to see Sarah accepting a sleeve of saltines from his son, her expression carefully neutral, but her hand slightly unsteady as she opened the package. When was the last time she'd eaten? He wondered. When was the last time someone had offered her food without expecting something in return? As the water for the pasta began to boil, Marcus found himself stealing glances at Sarah. She sat at the small kitchen table, still clutching her duffel bag, but less rigid than before. Tommy had convinced her to let him show her his collection of toy cars, and she examined each one with the solemnity of an art critic, making observations that sent Tommy into fits of delighted giggles. "The red one's my favorite too," she was saying. "Red cars are the fastest, obviously." "Obviously," Tommy agreed sagely. "Dad says I can have a real red car when I'm 16, but that's like 1,000,000 years away." 8 years, Marcus corrected from the stove. "And we'll see about the red car." "But you promised," Tommy protested, launching into a detailed argument. about the binding nature of parental promises. Sarah watched the exchange with something that might have been wistfulness, and Marcus wondered about her own father, whether there had been promises made and kept before the fire changed everything. Dinner was a surprisingly comfortable affair. Sarah ate with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned not to waste food, but she also engaged with Tommy's endless questions and observations. She had a way of listening that made even his most rambling stories seem important, nodding at the right moments and asking follow-up questions that showed she was really paying attention. "So you're really going to help Dad organize the garage?" Tommy asked around a mouthful of mac and cheese. "Because it's super messy back there, like mountains of stuff everywhere." "That's the plan," Sarah said, glancing at Marcus. "If you're..." "Dad thinks I can handle it." "Oh, you can totally handle it," Tommy said confidently. "You seem really smart." "Smarter than Dad, probably." "Hey now," Marcus protested with mock indignation. "I'm sitting right here." Sarah's smile was small, but real, and for a moment, the haunted look in her eyes receded. She helped clear the table without being asked, moving carefully but efficiently around the small kitchen. Marcus noticed she favored her left side slightly, another reminder of whatever she'd been through. After Tommy was settled in front of the television with his nightly cartoon, Marcus showed Sarah to the small guest room that doubled as storage space and his home office. It wasn't much: a twin bed, a dresser with a broken drawer, boxes of old paperwork stacked in the corners, but it had a window that looked out over the small garden behind the building and a door that locked from the inside. "The sheets are clean," Marcus said, suddenly conscious of how sparse the room looked. "Bathroom's just down the hall. Towels are in the closet if you want a shower." Sarah set her duffel bag on the bed and turned to face him, her expression guarded again. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." Marcus considered the question, looking at this girl who was barely more than a child herself, carrying a child of her own, marked by trauma but still standing. "Still fighting, because someone should," he said simply. "Because you asked for work, not a handout. Because my son thinks you're smart, and Tommy's a pretty good judge of character." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "I won't be any trouble," she said. "I'll work hard, I promise. I just need a little time to figure things out." "We all need time to figure things out," Marcus said. "Take as long as you need." He left her alone to settle in, but the sounds from the room were minimal: the soft creak of bed springs, the quiet rustle of clothing being moved around. No television, no music, no phone calls. Just silence and the occasional sound of movement. That suggested someone trying very hard to take up as little space as possible. Tommy was already in his pajamas when Marcus went to tuck him in, full of questions about their unexpected houseguest. "Is Sarah going to live with us now?" he asked, arranging his stuffed animals in their precise nightly formation around his pillow. "Just for a little while," Marcus said. "She needs some help right now." "Because of the fire?" Tommy's voice was matter-of-fact. At 8, he had the child's ability to process difficult information without the emotional baggage that adults carried. Marcus paused in the act of pulling up the covers. "How did you know about a fire?" "Her scars," Tommy said simply. "Billy Henderson's dad got burned at work last year, and he had marks like that, but not as many." He considered this seriously. "Sarah's baby is going to be okay, right? Even though Sarah got hurt?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. In all his concern for Sarah's immediate needs, food, shelter, safety, he hadn't fully processed the implications of her pregnancy. A teenage girl, alone, scarred, carrying a child she would have to raise without support or resources. The magnitude of her situation was staggering. "I hope so, buddy," Marcus said quietly. "I really hope so." "Maybe we can help," Tommy said with the casual optimism of childhood. "I'm really good at helping. Remember when I helped you fix Mrs. Rodriguez's car by holding the flashlight?" "You're the best helper I know," Marcus agreed, kissing his son's forehead. "Now get some sleep, school tomorrow." But Marcus himself lay awake long after Tommy's breathing had settled into the deep rhythm of sleep. Through the thin walls of the apartment, he could hear Sarah moving around, the soft sounds of someone trying to settle into an unfamiliar space. He thought about the careful way she had eaten dinner, the way she had listened to Tommy with such focused attention, the pride in her voice when she had asked for work instead of charity. He thought about the house fire he had read about months ago, the parents who hadn't made it out, the teenage daughter who had barely survived, the girl who was now sleeping in his guest room, carrying a child she would have to raise alone unless someone stepped up to help. Marcus had never considered himself particularly heroic. He was just a guy trying to keep his business afloat and raise his son right, struggling with his own problems and limitations. But looking up at the ceiling, in the darkness, listening to the sounds of someone else's breathing in his home, he felt something shift inside him. A sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that seemed to seep into your bones and settle there. Marcus woke early, as was his habit, and found Sarah already in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She had found the instant coffee in the back of the cabinet and made it black, strong enough to strip paint. "Morning," Marcus said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Sleep okay?" Sarah nodded, though the dark circles under her eyes suggested otherwise. "Thank you," she said. "For the room. For dinner. She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything he had offered without expecting anything in return. "No need to thank me," Marcus said, starting a fresh pot of coffee. The good stuff, not the instant sludge Sarah had been drinking. "You ready to see what we're dealing with in that back room?" They spent the morning sorting through years of accumulated parts and paperwork, Sarah proving to have an organizational mind that impressed Marcus. She created systems where he had only seen chaos, grouping similar items together and making lists with neat handwriting that put his own scrawl to shame. "You've done this kind of work before," Marcus observed, watching her efficiently categorize distributor caps by make and model. "My dad owned a hardware store," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. "I used to help him with inventory." It was the first time she had mentioned her family directly, and Marcus didn't push for more information. But he filed away the detail, another piece of the puzzle that was Sarah Chun, a girl who had grown up in a family business, who understood the value of organization and hard work, whose world had been destroyed in a single night of flames and smoke. Tommy burst through the garage door around noon, home from school and full of energy. "Sarah!" he called out, as if she were an old friend he hadn't seen in weeks rather than someone who had been a stranger just 24 hours ago. "Want to see what I learned in math today? It's really cool." Sarah emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on an old towel, and Marcus watched as her face transformed at the sight of his son. The weariness fell away, replaced by genuine warmth that made her look younger, less burdened. "Show me everything," she said seriously, and Tommy launched into an elaborate explanation of long division that had Sarah nodding along as if it were the most fascinating subject in the world. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself watching the interactions between Sarah and Tommy with growing amazement. She had a natural way with children, patient and attentive without being condescending. She helped Tommy with his homework, listened to his plans for various engineering projects, and even agreed to be the princess in need of rescue when he wanted to play Knights and Dragons. "You're really good with him," Marcus said during a quiet moment when Tommy had gone upstairs to get his art supplies. Sarah's hand moved to her belly in that protective gesture he was beginning to recognize. "I like kids," she said simply. "They don't see the scars first." The honesty of the statement caught Marcus off guard. He wanted to say something reassuring, to tell her that the scars didn't define her, that anyone who really mattered would see past them to the person underneath. But he sensed that platitudes wouldn't help, that Sarah had probably heard all the well-meaning words before. Instead, he said, "Tommy asked me last night if your baby would be okay. He's worried about you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She didn't try to hide this time. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know anything about being a mother. I don't know how I'm going to take care of a baby when I can barely take care of myself." "Nobody knows how to be a parent," Marcus said. "We all just figure it out as we go along. Make mistakes, learn from them, try to do better the next time." "But you have a home, a job, stability," Sarah said. "I have nothing, less than nothing." Marcus looked around the garage, at the business that was barely breaking even, at the pile of bills on his desk, at the life he was building one day at a time with no guarantees and no safety net. "I didn't always have this," he said. "When Tommy's mom left, I felt like I had nothing too. No idea how to raise a kid on my own, no money, no plan. Just the determination to figure it out somehow." Sarah studied his face, looking for something she needed to find there. "How did you do it?" "One day at a time," Marcus said. "And I accepted help when it was offered, which was the hardest part." Over the following days, Sarah settled into a routine that seemed to work for all of them. She arrived at the garage early each morning, organized and cleaned with systematic thoroughness, and gradually began taking on more responsibilities. She had a good head for numbers, and Marcus found himself trusting her with the books, with ordering parts, with scheduling appointments. More importantly, she became a natural part of Tommy's after-school routine. She helped him with homework, listened to his stories about school, and somehow managed to convince him that vegetables were actually edible when prepared correctly. Marcus would find them in the small kitchen above the garage, Sarah teaching Tommy how to chop onions without crying while she stirred something fragrant on the stove. "She's really good at cooking," Tommy reported to his father one evening. "Way better than you, Dad, no offense." "None taken," Marcus said, though he was secretly pleased to see his son bonding with Sarah. Tommy had been the man of the house for too long, taking on responsibilities that no 8-year-old should have to carry. Having another adult around, someone who could share the load, was good for both of them. But it was the quiet moments that told Marcus the most about who Sarah really was. The way she talked softly to her unborn baby when she thought no one was listening, her hand making gentle circles on her growing belly. The careful way she arranged her few possessions in the guest room, as if she were afraid to claim too much space. The gratitude in her eyes when he brought her a sandwich at lunch, as if basic kindness were an unexpected gift. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Marcus was closing up the garage for the day when he heard voices from the apartment upstairs. Not unusual, Tommy was always chattering about something, but there was a different quality to the conversation that made him pause. "Does it hurt?" Tommy was asking, his voice full of 8-year-old curiosity. Sometimes, Sarah's voice was patient, understanding, but not as much as it used to. Marcus climbed the stairs quietly, not wanting to interrupt but concerned about what they might be discussing. He found them in the living room, Tommy sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of Sarah, who was curled up on the couch. "Can I touch it?" Tommy asked, and Marcus realized with a start that he was talking about Sarah's scars. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Tommy reached out with the careful gentleness that children could sometimes surprise you with, his small fingers tracing the raised skin along her jawline. "It feels different," he said matter-of-factly, "but not scary." "Just different. That's exactly right," Sarah said softly. "Just different." Marcus backed away from the doorway, not wanting to intrude on the moment. But he carried the image with him as he finished his work downstairs, his son's acceptance, Sarah's trust, the simple human connection that transcended the visible marks of trauma. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Sarah found Marcus in the garage, where he was working late on a particularly stubborn transmission. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him work, before clearing her throat softly. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice serious. Marcus looked up from the transmission, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she was clutching a piece of paper in her hand. "Okay," he said, setting down his wrench and giving her his full attention. Sarah took a deep breath, then handed him the paper. It was a letter from a social services caseworker, dated 3 days ago. Marcus scanned the contents quickly, his heart sinking as he read. "They want me to report to a group home in Seattle," Sarah said, her voice flat, "for pregnant teens. They've been looking for me since I left the hospital." Marcus looked up from the letter, seeing the fear in her eyes, the way she was braced for rejection. "How long have you had this?" "It was forwarded from my last address. I picked it up from the post office yesterday." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "I have to report by Friday, or they'll issue a warrant." Marcus studied the letter more carefully, noting the bureaucratic language, the list of requirements and restrictions. "What do you want to do?" he asked. The question seemed to surprise her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what do you want? Do you want to go to this group home? Do you think it would be good for you and the baby?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I want to stay here," she said, the words rushing out as if she were afraid to say them. "I know I don't have the right to ask, and I know it's not fair to you and Tommy, but I feel safe here. For the first time since the fire, I feel like I might actually be okay." Marcus set the letter down on his workbench and really looked at Sarah, this girl who had walked into his garage broken and desperate, who had somehow become an integral part of their small family in just 3 weeks. She worked harder than employees he'd paid twice as much. She treated Tommy with genuine affection and respect, and she had brought a sense of order and purpose to their chaotic household. More than that, she had reminded him what it felt like to be needed for something more than just fixing engines and paying bills. She had given him a chance to be the kind of man he wanted his son to grow up to, someone who helped when help was needed, who offered shelter to those caught in the storm. "Then you'll stay," Marcus said simply. Sarah stared at him as if she hadn't heard correctly. "But the letter, we'll figure it out," Marcus said. "Tomorrow I'll call the caseworker, explain the situation. You're not homeless or on the streets. You have a job, a place to live, people who care about you. That has to count for something. You'd do that?" Sarah's voice was thick with tears. "You'd fight for me?" Marcus thought about his son upstairs, sleeping peacefully because he knew the adults in his life would keep him safe. He thought about Sarah, alone and frightened, carrying a child she would love and protect with everything she had. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be, the kind of father, the kind of human being. "Yeah," he said. "I'd fight for you." Sarah broke down then, weeks of held-back tears finally finding their release. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then crossed the garage and pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of her pregnancy and her healing injuries. She clung to him like a lifeline, and he realized that somewhere along the way, she had become exactly that for him too. The fight with social services took 2 weeks and involved more paperwork than Marcus had ever seen in his life. But Sarah had been right. He was willing to fight for her, and Tommy's enthusiastic endorsement of their living arrangement carried more weight with the caseworker than Marcus had expected. "The boy clearly adores her," the caseworker, Mrs. Peterson, noted during her home visit, "and she's obviously been a positive influence. His teacher says his grades have improved significantly since Sarah started helping with his homework." In the end, they worked out an arrangement that satisfied everyone. Sarah would remain in Marcus's custody as a foster placement with regular check-ins and support services to help her prepare for motherhood. She would continue working at the garage and save money for the baby's arrival. And Marcus would officially become what he had already become in practice, her guardian and advocate. The night they got the official approval, Marcus found Sarah. In the nursery she had been setting up in the corner of her room. She had painted the walls a soft yellow and hung cheerful mobiles from the ceiling. A crib that Marcus had assembled sat ready for its future occupant, complete with blankets that Sarah had been knitting during her evening hours. "Ready for this?" Marcus asked, watching her fold tiny onesies with careful precision. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling the strong kicks of the baby who would arrive in just a few more weeks. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but also excited and grateful." "So grateful for what?" Sarah looked around the room that had become hers, at the life she was building in the safety and acceptance Marcus had offered. "For you believing I was worth fighting for," she said. "For Tommy making me laugh every day. For having a place where I can be myself, scars and all." Marcus smiled, thinking about how much had changed since that rainy evening when Sarah had walked into his garage looking for work. She had found so much more than a job, and so had he. She had found a family, a future, a chance to heal and grow and become the mother she was meant to be. And he had found something he hadn't even known he was missing, a sense of purpose that went beyond just surviving, beyond just getting through each day. He had found the satisfaction that came from making a real difference in someone's life, from being the kind of man his son could be proud of, from building something meaningful out of broken pieces. As Sarah continued preparing for the baby's arrival, Marcus realized that she had already become exactly what the title had promised, his strength. Not in some dramatic, life-saving way, but in the quiet daily miracle of showing up, of caring, of choosing to build something beautiful out of the ashes of tragedy. The baby would come soon, and their small family would grow by one more. There would be sleepless nights and new challenges, moments of doubt and fear and overwhelming responsibility. But they would face it all together, this unlikely family. Bound not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the simple human decision to take care of each other. And that, Marcus thought as he watched Sarah hum softly to the child she carried, was the strongest foundation of all. The October wind rattled the windows of the apartment as Sarah woke to the familiar sound of Marcus starting his day in the kitchen below. 5 months had passed since that first evening when she'd walked into Peterson's auto repair desperate and alone, and the rhythm of their shared life had become as natural as breathing. She could hear Tommy's muffled voice through the thin walls, probably negotiating for extra syrup on his pancakes, a daily battle he waged with unwavering optimism. Sarah pressed her hands against her belly, feeling the baby's morning stretches. 7 months along now, and Dr. Martinez had pronounced both mother and child healthy at yesterday's appointment. The burns on her face and neck had healed into pale pink lines that no longer drew stares from strangers, and her hair had grown long enough to cover most of the scarring along her hairline. But more than the physical healing, it was the sense of belonging that had transformed her most profoundly. She dressed carefully in the loose-fitting clothes that Marcus had helped her buy when her old jeans became impossible to button, then made her way downstairs to find the morning scene playing out exactly as she'd predicted. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, syrup bottle in hand, while Marcus stood at the stove flipping pancakes with the practiced efficiency of a man who had mastered the art of single parenthood. "Morning, sunshine," Marcus said without turning around, a greeting that never failed to make Sarah smile. In her parents' house, mornings had been rushed affairs of gulped coffee and hurried goodbyes. Here, there was time for conversation, for Tommy's elaborate stories about his dreams, for the quiet companionship that Sarah had never realized she'd been missing. "The baby's being a gymnast again," Sarah said, settling into her usual chair and accepting the cup of decaffeinated coffee that Tommy had already prepared for her. Another small kindness that had become routine, the 8-year-old's understanding that Sarah needed different things now. "Maybe it'll be good at sports like Tommy," Marcus suggested, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Remember to eat the fruit too. Dr. Martinez said you need more vitamin C. The casual way he remembered details from her doctor's appointments, the gentle reminders about nutrition and rest, the way he'd rearranged his schedule to drive her to every checkup, it all spoke to a level of care that Sarah was still learning to accept. In the group home she briefly stayed in after leaving the hospital, care had been institutional, well-meaning but impersonal. Here, it was woven into the fabric of daily life. Tommy launched into his latest theory about whether babies could hear music while they were still inside their mothers, a topic that had fascinated him ever since Sarah had mentioned feeling the baby move when she played the radio. His questions were endless and completely earnest, treating Sarah's pregnancy as the most interesting scientific phenomenon he'd ever encountered. So if I sing to Sarah's belly, the baby will know my voice when it's born? Tommy asked, syrup dripping from his fork as he gestured enthusiastically. That's exactly right, Sarah confirmed. The baby will recognize you as soon as it arrives. Cool, I'm going to teach it all my favorite songs. And I'll tell it about all the best hiding spots in the garage, and how to make Dad laugh when he's stressed about money. Marcus shot a look at his son, clearly wondering how much Tommy had picked up on about their financial struggles. Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs too, the way Marcus's jaw tightened when he looked at bills, the careful way he budgeted groceries, the extra hours he'd been putting in at the garage to build up savings before the baby arrived. She'd been contributing what she could from her wages, insisting on paying for her own food and medical expenses despite Marcus's protests. But she knew her small salary barely made a dent in the real costs of supporting a growing family. The knowledge weighed on her, adding guilt to the gratitude that colored every interaction. The morning routine continued with Tommy gathering his school supplies while Sarah packed his lunch, a task she'd gradually taken over as her pregnancy progressed. And Marcus needed more time in the garage. She'd learned his preferences: no crusts on sandwiches, apple slices cut thin, a note tucked into his lunchbox with encouragement for whatever challenge the day might bring. Remember, you have soccer practice after school, Marcus called from the garage entrance. Mrs. Rodriguez is picking you up with Miguel. Can Sarah come watch my game on Saturday? Tommy asked, shouldering his backpack. Please, I play way better when she's there cheering for me. Sarah felt the familiar tug of affection mixed with responsibility. Tommy had claimed her as his own personal cheerleader, and she took the role seriously, attending every game and practice she could manage. The other parents had been curious at first. Who was this young pregnant woman with the scarred face sitting in the bleachers with the Peterson family? But Tommy's proud introductions and obvious affection had smoothed over any awkwardness. Wouldn't miss it, Sarah promised, ruffling his hair. Now go learn something amazing. After Tommy left for school, the apartment settled into its quieter daytime rhythm. Sarah had found she enjoyed these morning hours when she could work on the garage's paperwork without interruption, organizing Marcus's chaotic filing system and updating the customer database he'd been meaning to digitize for years. She'd discovered a talent for the administrative side of the business, creating systems that streamlined everything from parts ordering to appointment scheduling. Marcus had been resistant at first, protective of the way his grandfather had always done things, but he couldn't argue with results. Customer satisfaction was up, they were booking more appointments, and the books were finally showing consistent profit. You've got a gift for this, Marcus said, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of fresh coffee. My grandfather would have loved seeing the garage run this efficiently. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, noting how Marcus always seemed to appear with refreshments right when she needed them. Tell me about him, she said. Your grandfather. Marcus settled into the chair across from her desk, his expression growing thoughtful. He didn't talk about family often, and Sarah had learned not to push for information he wasn't ready to share. But lately, as her due date approached and questions about family history became more relevant, he'd been opening up about the past. Frank Peterson was old school in the best way, Marcus began, his voice warm with memory. Built this place. From nothing, learned to fix everything that rolled through those doors. He used to say that every car had a story, and every customer was part of our community. Sounds like Tommy gets his curiosity from him, Sarah observed, watching Marcus's face light up at the connection. Oh, definitely. Grandpa Frank would have had Tommy under the hood of a car by now, teaching him to read engine sounds and feel. For problems. He believed you learned with your hands, not just your head. Sarah filed away this information, another piece of the puzzle that was Marcus Peterson. She'd been building a mental picture of his history from the stories he shared. The photographs on his desk, the way he approached problems with patience and methodical thinking. A man shaped by a grandfather who valued community and craftsmanship, who'd inherited not just a business but a philosophy about how to treat people. The morning passed quickly as Sarah worked through the stack of invoices and appointment requests. She'd instituted a new system for follow-up calls, checking on customers a week after major repairs to ensure everything was running smoothly. The gesture had generated more word-of-mouth referrals than any advertising Marcus had ever tried. Around 11, the phone rang with a call that would change everything, though Sarah didn't realize it at the time. The voice on the other end was professional but warm, introducing herself as Janet Morrison from the Regional Small Business Development Center. "We've been hearing excellent things about Peterson's auto repair," Janet said. "Several of our clients have mentioned the exceptional service they've received recently. We'd like to discuss some opportunities that might be available to help you expand." Sarah took detailed notes, scheduling an appointment for the following week and gathering information about grant programs for small businesses in their area. When she hung up, she felt a flutter of excitement that had nothing to do with the baby's movement. This could be exactly what Marcus needed to secure the garage's future, to build the kind of stability that would benefit all of them. But when she shared the news with Marcus over lunch, his reaction was more cautious than she'd expected. "Expansion means debt," he said, picking at his sandwich. "It means risk. I've got responsibilities now that I didn't have before." Sarah understood the subtext. Her pregnancy had changed the equation, adding medical expenses and future costs that made financial risks seem more dangerous. But she also saw the way Marcus's eyes lit up when he talked about his grandfather's vision for the garage, the dreams he'd put aside in favor of playing it safe. "What if we looked at the numbers?" she suggested carefully. "Just to see what the possibilities are. No commitment, just information." Marcus considered this for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right, information never hurt anyone." The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, keeping both of them busy. Sarah had become the unofficial customer service representative, greeting clients and explaining repairs in language that didn't require an engineering degree. She'd learned that people appreciated honesty about costs and timeframes, even when the news wasn't what they wanted to hear. Mrs. Chun, an elderly woman whose Honda had been making mysterious grinding noises, was Sarah's last appointment of the day. The name had given Sarah a moment's pause. Chun was her own surname, though she'd never met this particular Mrs. Chun before. The woman was tiny and precise, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're very young to be running the business side," Mrs. Chun observed, settling into the chair beside Sarah's desk. "I just handle the scheduling and paperwork," Sarah said diplomatically. "Marcus does all the real work." Mrs. Chun studied Sarah's face with the frank assessment of someone who'd lived long enough to see past surface appearances. "Those are healing burns," she said matter-of-factly. "My husband was a firefighter. I know the look." Sarah tensed, waiting for the familiar mixture of pity and curiosity that such observations usually brought. Instead, Mrs. Chun nodded approvingly. "Good. For you," the older woman said. "Building something new instead of dwelling on what was lost. That takes strength." The unexpected validation brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She'd grown accustomed to kindness from Marcus and Tommy, but acceptance from strangers still caught her off guard. Mrs. Chun seemed to understand this, patting Sarah's hand with gentle efficiency. "My Honda's been making noise for 3 weeks," Mrs. Chun continued, switching smoothly back to business. "My grandson says I should just buy a new car, but this one has good bones. Sometimes the things worth keeping just need a little extra care." Sarah scheduled the diagnostic appointment, but she carried Mrs. Chun's words with her for the rest of the day. Sometimes the things worth keeping just need a little extra care. It felt like more than automotive advice. When Tommy returned from soccer practice that evening, he was full of energy and stories about his day. He'd scored 2 goals, and his coach had praised his teamwork, achievements he shared with Sarah before anyone else. The trust in his young face, the way he sought her approval and attention, never failed to move her. "Guess what?" Tommy announced over dinner. "Coach Martinez says there's going to be a family tournament next month. Parents and kids playing together. We should totally enter." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances across the table. They'd been navigating these moments more frequently lately, occasions when Tommy included Sarah so naturally in the category of family that correcting him felt unnecessarily cruel. "That sounds fun," Sarah said carefully. "Though I might be more of a cheerleader than a player by then." "That's okay," Tommy said with the matter-of-fact acceptance that characterized all his interactions with Sarah's pregnancy. "You can be our team manager. Every good team needs a manager." After dinner, while Marcus helped Tommy with his homework, Sarah found herself standing in the small nursery she'd been preparing. The room had evolved over the months from a corner with a crib to a fully equipped space ready for a baby's arrival. She'd painted the walls herself, choosing a soft green that would work for either a boy or girl. Marcus had installed floating shelves for books and toys, and Tommy had contributed several of his own stuffed animals to what he called the Baby's Welcoming Committee. Everything was ready except for one crucial detail. Sarah still hadn't definitively decided what would happen after the baby was born. The plan had always been temporary, a place to stay until she could get on her feet and figure out her next steps. But as her due date approached, the thought of leaving this life she'd built felt increasingly impossible. She'd saved enough money for a security deposit on a small apartment, and there were programs available to help young mothers with housing and childcare. She could make it work, provide for her child independently, prove to herself and the world that she was capable of standing on her own. But did she want to? The question had been nagging at her for weeks, growing more urgent as the baby's arrival approached. She'd found something here that she'd never expected, not just safety and shelter, but belonging. Tommy treated her like the big sister he'd never had, including her in his plans and dreams with unconscious assumption that she'd always be there. Marcus had become something harder to define, mentor, protector, friend, the steady presence that made everything else possible. Sarah pressed her hand against the nursery window, looking out at the small garden where Tommy had planted sunflowers that summer, watching them grow from seeds to towering stalks that now bobbed in the autumn wind. Everything here felt permanent, rooted, the kind of stability she'd always dreamed of providing for her child. But permanence wasn't something she could simply claim. It had to be offered, chosen by everyone involved. And she couldn't ask Marcus to take on the responsibility of another child when he was already doing so much. Couldn't assume that his kindness extended to a lifetime commitment he'd never signed up for. "Hey," Marcus's voice from the doorway interrupted her thoughts. "Tommy's asleep. Mind if I join you?" Sarah nodded, grateful for the company. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking at the room they'd prepared for a baby who would arrive in just a few weeks. Having second thoughts about the paint color? Marcus asked lightly, but Sarah could hear the concern beneath the humor. "About everything," Sarah admitted. "About what happens next, about whether I'm ready for this." Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Being scared doesn't mean you're not ready. It means you understand how important this is. I don't want to be a burden, Sarah said quietly. You and Tommy have already done so much for me. I can't expect you to take on even more responsibility. Is that what you think this is? Marcus asked. A burden? Sarah met his eyes, seeing something there she couldn't quite interpret. What else would it be? Family, Marcus said simply. That's what Tommy calls it, and I think he's got the right idea. The word hung between them, loaded with possibilities and fears. Family meant permanence, commitment, shared responsibility, and shared joy. It meant belonging to something bigger than yourself, and trusting others to catch you when you fell. I don't want to trap you into something you never chose, Sarah said. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. Sarah, when you walked into my garage that night, I thought I was just helping someone who needed a job. But watching you these past months, seeing how you've become part of our lives, how you've made everything better, that's not something that happened to me. That's something I chose, every single day. And Tommy? Tommy chose you from the first moment he met you. He's been planning your baby's entire childhood. Did you know that? He's got theories about which bedroom would work best when the baby gets older, plans for teaching it to ride a bike, ideas about the perfect Halloween costumes for the three of you to wear together. Sarah felt tears starting, the emotional overwhelm that had become common as her pregnancy progressed. But these weren't tears of fear or uncertainty. They were relief, joy, the recognition of something she'd been hoping for, but hadn't dared to name. So what are you saying? She asked. I'm saying we're already a family, Marcus replied. We have been for months. The only question is whether we make it official. Before Sarah could respond, they heard a small sound from the hallway. Tommy stood in the doorway in his pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Did someone say family? He asked hopefully. Because I had the best dream about teaching the baby to play soccer, and I really think we should make it happen for real. Sarah laughed through her tears, opening her arms to include Tommy in the conversation. He padded over in his bare feet, wrapping his arms around both adults with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted his place in their affections. What do you think, Tommy? Marcus asked. Should we make this family official? Adopt Sarah and the baby for real? Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. Yes, can we? Really? Can Sarah be my actual sister and the baby be my actual sibling? If Sarah wants to, Marcus said, looking at her carefully. If she thinks this crazy family of ours is worth making permanent. Sarah looked around the nursery they'd prepared together, at the man who'd offered her safety when she had nowhere else to go, at the boy who'd accepted her without question from the very first day. She thought about the life they'd built together, the routines and jokes and small kindnesses that had become the foundation of everything good in her world. Yes, she said quietly, then louder, yes, I want this to be permanent. I want us to be a real family. Tommy whooped with joy, dancing around the nursery in his pajamas while Marcus pulled Sarah into a careful hug that took into account her growing belly and healing heart. For the first time since the fire that had taken everything she'd known, Sarah felt completely safe, completely loved, completely home. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and legal consultations as Marcus began the process of formally adopting Sarah. The system that had once seemed like an insurmountable bureaucracy now felt manageable with Marcus advocating for her, hiring a lawyer who specialized in family cases and walking her through every step of the process. Dr. Martinez pronounced both Sarah and the baby ready for delivery at any time, and the hospital bag sat packed by the door like a promise of the future that was rushing toward them. Tommy had appointed himself the official baby preparation coordinator, reading parenting books from the library and offering advice based on his extensive research. Did you know babies can't see very far when they're first born? Tommy announced over breakfast one morning. So we need to make sure we always talk to it from up close so it knows we're there. Where did you learn that? Marcus asked, clearly impressed by his son's dedication to his new role as big brother. Library book about infant development. Tommy said proudly. Mrs. Peterson in the children's section has been helping me find the best ones. Sarah exchanged a look with Marcus, both of them struck by the 8-year-old's maturity and commitment. Tommy had embraced his upcoming role with the seriousness of someone who understood the magnitude of bringing the new life into their family. The official adoption hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after Sarah's due date, assuming the baby arrived on time. Marcus had explained that adopting Sarah would make the subsequent adoption of the baby much simpler, creating a clear legal framework for their unconventional but loving family structure. Are you nervous? Sarah asked Marcus as they left the lawyer's office after their final pre-hearing consultation. Terrified, Marcus admitted, but the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something important is about to happen. Sarah understood completely. The fear wasn't about whether they were making the right choice. That had never been in question. It was the fear of stepping fully into a new identity, of claiming the thing she'd wanted most, but never dared to believe possible. That evening, as autumn settled into early winter and the first frost touched the garden outside, Sarah felt the first unmistakable signs that the baby was ready to make its entrance into the world. The contractions started gently, barely noticeable. At first, then gradually increased in intensity and frequency. She'd been timing them quietly for an hour, not wanting to alarm Marcus and Tommy unnecessarily, when Marcus appeared in the kitchen where she was attempting to continue her normal evening routine. "How long have you been in labor?" he asked, calmly, noting the way she paused and breathed to a contraction. "How did you know?" You get this look of intense concentration, and you keep touching your back in the same spot. Plus, you've reorganized the spice cabinet twice in the last hour, which is what you do when you're trying to stay busy. Sarah had to laugh at how well he'd learned to read her signals. About 2 hours. They're still pretty far apart, but definitely getting stronger. Marcus moved into action with the calm efficiency she'd come to rely on. He called Mrs. Rodriguez to come stay with Tommy, packed the car with Sarah's hospital bag and the birth plan they'd carefully prepared, and helped Sarah through the increasingly intense contractions with the patience of someone who'd been through this before. "Is the baby coming now?" Tommy asked, appearing in the kitchen in his pajamas, clearly awakened by the unusual activity. "Soon," Sarah said, managing a smile between contractions. "Are you ready to be a big brother?" "I've been ready forever," Tommy declared, then hugged her carefully. "Will you tell the baby I'm excited to meet it?" "First thing," Sarah promised. The drive to the hospital felt surreal, months of preparation finally culminating in this moment of transition. Marcus held her hand through the contractions, offering quiet encouragement and reminding her to breathe. Sarah felt a mix of excitement and terror, the knowledge that in a few hours everything would change. Their family would grow by one, and the life they'd built together would enter a completely new phase. Labor progressed faster than expected, and by midnight Sarah was holding a tiny, perfect daughter with dark hair and serious eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with intense curiosity. The baby was healthy and alert, crying just enough to prove her lungs were working before settling into quiet observation of her new world. "She's beautiful," Marcus said softly, and Sarah could hear the emotion in his voice. "What are you going to name her?" Sarah looked down at the tiny face, thinking about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. The fire that had taken her parents, the months of healing and uncertainty, the night she'd walked into Peterson's auto repair looking for work and found so much more. "Hope," she said finally. "Hope Peterson, because that's what she represents. What you both gave me." Marcus's eyes filled with tears as he gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Hope Peterson, he repeated. I like it. Welcome to the family, Hope. Over the next 3 days in the hospital, their new family dynamics began to take shape. Tommy was completely smitten with his baby sister, holding her with careful reverence and talking to her in the serious voice he reserved for important conversations. He'd appointed himself her official translator, interpreting every cry and facial expression with elaborate theories about what Hope was trying to communicate. She's obviously very intelligent, Tommy informed the nurses. Look how she follows. Sounds with her eyes. And she definitely recognized my voice from when I used to sing to Sarah's belly. Sarah watched these interactions with a heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was what family looked like, not perfect, not conventional, but real and loving and committed to taking care of each other no matter what. Marcus had taken time off from the garage to be with them, arranging for his part-time mechanic to handle the essential repairs and rescheduling everything else. His priority was clear, being present for this transition, making sure Sarah and Hope had everything they needed, helping Tommy adjust to his new role as big brother. You don't have to stay, Sarah said on their second day in the hospital. I know the garage needs you. The garage will survive, Marcus replied firmly. This is where I need to be. When they finally brought Hope home, the apartment felt transformed by her presence. The nursery that had sat waiting for months was suddenly alive with purpose, filled with the sounds and rhythms of a newborn's needs. Sarah marveled at how quickly their established routines adapted to accommodate this tiny new person, who seemed to have strong opinions about everything from feeding schedules to sleeping positions. Tommy threw himself into his role as big brother, with characteristic enthusiasm, helping with diaper changes and bottle preparation, reading stories aloud to Hope even though she was too young to understand the words. He'd created an elaborate schedule for introducing her to all the important things in their world: the garden, the garage, his favorite books, the collection of toy cars that he was sure she'd love when she was old enough to appreciate good. Engineering. Marcus revealed a natural talent for baby care that surprised everyone, including himself. He could calm Hope's crying with a combination of gentle rocking and hummed melodies, and he'd somehow intuited the art of one-handed diaper changes that left Sarah in awe. Where did you learn all this? Sarah asked, watching him efficiently. Burp Hope while simultaneously heating a bottle for her next feeding. Trial by fire with Tommy, Marcus admitted. His mom left when he was 18 months old. I had to figure it out fast. It was the most he'd ever said about his ex-wife, and Sarah didn't push for more details. But she filed away the information. Another piece of understanding about the man who'd somehow become the anchor of her entire world. The adoption hearing took place when Hope was 3 weeks old, in a courthouse conference room that felt too formal for such a life-changing moment. The judge was a kind woman who'd clearly reviewed their case thoroughly, asking thoughtful questions about their living situation and plans for the future. Mr. Peterson, the judge said, you're taking on significant responsibility here. 2 children, 1 an infant. Are you prepared for the financial and emotional commitment this represents? Your Honor, Marcus replied, Sarah and Hope aren't burdens I'm taking on. They're family I'm claiming. We've been living as a family for months already. This just makes it legal. The judge smiled at that, then turned to Sarah. Ms. Chun, you're very young to be making such a momentous decision. Are you certain this is what you want? Sarah looked around the room at the people who'd become her whole world. Marcus holding Hope with practiced ease, Tommy sitting up straight in his chair with the seriousness he brought to all important occasions, the lawyer, who'd walked them through every step of this process with patience and care. Your Honor, when I was 17, I lost everything I'd ever known. My parents, my home, my entire sense of who I was supposed to be. Marcus and Tommy didn't just give me a place to live. They gave me a reason to believe in the future again. They gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one again. And the baby's father? The judge asked gently. Is there any possibility he might contest this arrangement? Sarah's hand moved instinctively to Hope, who was sleeping peacefully in Marcus's arms. There is no father in the picture, Your Honor. There never has been. It's always just been us. The judge nodded, making notes in her file. After a few more routine questions, she looked up with a smile that transformed her entire face. Based on everything I've seen and heard today, it's clear that this is a family in every way that matters. I'm happy to grant the adoption petition. Congratulations, Peterson family. The moment felt both monumentally important and quietly natural. They were already living as a family, already committed to each other in all the ways that mattered. The legal recognition just confirmed what their hearts had known for months. Walking out of the courthouse, Tommy skipped ahead while Marcus carried Hope and kept his free arm around Sarah's shoulders. They stopped for ice cream to celebrate, finding a quiet corner booth where they could feed Hope and let Tommy elaborate on his plans for their first official family vacation. We should go somewhere with a beach, Tommy declared, gesturing with his spoon. Hope will love the ocean. And we can build the most epic sandcastle ever. She's a little young for beach trips, Sarah pointed out, but she was smiling at his enthusiasm. By next summer she'll be perfect beach age, Tommy insisted. We'll teach her to swim and everything. Sarah caught Marcus's eye across the table, seeing her own wonder reflected there. They'd created something beautiful and unexpected, this family built from broken pieces and sustained by love. Hope stirred in her car seat, making the tiny sounds that meant she was waking up, and Tommy immediately leaned over to greet her. Hey, baby sister, he said softly. Welcome to the Peterson family. We're going to have so many adventures together. As they drove home through the late afternoon sunshine, Sarah felt a peace she'd never experienced before. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and challenges, and the everyday miracles of family life. There would be difficult moments, late nights, financial worries, the ordinary struggles that all families faced. But they would face them together, this unlikely family that had found each other in the midst of loss and uncertainty. They would build something lasting and beautiful, proof that love could bloom in the most unexpected places, and that family was something you created, not just something you were born into. Hope made a soft sound from her car seat, and Sarah reached back to touch her tiny hand. In just a few hours, they'd all be home together, beginning the next chapter of their shared story. And for the first time since the fire had changed everything, Sarah felt not just safe, but genuinely excited about what tomorrow might bring. The spring morning brought with it the sound of Hope's laughter echoing through the apartment as Tommy made exaggerated faces over her high chair. At 18 months old, Hope had developed into a spirited toddler with an infectious giggle and an uncanny ability to charm anyone within a 50-foot radius. Her dark hair had grown into soft curls that refused to stay contained by any hair. Accessories Sarah attempted, and her eyes held the same serious intelligence that had marked her from birth. Sarah stood at the kitchen sink, washing the breakfast dishes while watching the daily entertainment that was Tommy trying to convince Hope to eat her scrambled eggs. The routine had evolved over the months since the adoption, shaped by Hope's emerging personality and Tommy's boundless creativity in finding new ways to engage his little sister. Airplane coming in for landing, Tommy announced dramatically, swooping a spoonful of eggs toward Hope's mouth. Please prepare for delicious touchdown. Hope clapped her hands and opened her mouth obligingly, then immediately spit the eggs back out with a mischievous grin that suggested she was more interested in the performance than the nutrition. She's playing with you, Sarah observed, unable to suppress her own smile at the familiar scene. I know, Tommy replied cheerfully. But she ate the toast, so that's progress, right, Hope? Tell Sarah how much you love the toast. Hope responded by banging her sippy cup on the high chair tray and babbling what sounded suspiciously like "tu-tu-tu," her current attempt at saying Tommy's name. The sound never failed to make Tommy beam with pride at being Hope's first real word. Marcus emerged from the bedroom, already dressed for work, but moving with the unhurried pace of someone who'd learned to build buffer time into his morning routine. Hope immediately began bouncing in her chair and reaching for him, her face lighting up with the pure joy reserved for her favorite people. "There's my girl," Marcus said, lifting Hope from her high chair and settling her on his hip. She immediately grabbed for his shirt pocket, having learned that it often contained small treasures, like spare buttons or interesting bolts that made satisfying rattling sounds. "Janet Morrison called yesterday afternoon," Sarah said, handing Marcus his coffee. "The grant application went through. They want to schedule a site visit next week to discuss the expansion timeline." Marcus paused with his coffee halfway to his lips, the magnitude of the news clearly sinking in. For months, they'd been working toward this moment, the possibility of expanding Peterson's auto repair into the vacant space next door, adding 2 more service bays and the capacity to take on larger commercial contracts. Seriously? They approved. "The full amount?" "Every penny," Sarah confirmed. "Plus they want to feature us in their Success Stories newsletter. Apparently, we're a model for sustainable small business growth in underserved communities." Tommy looked up from where he was cleaning Hope's face with a damp washcloth. "Does this mean we're rich now?" "It means we're stable," Marcus corrected gently. "It means the garage will be here for a long time, and we can hire more people to help with the work." Sarah felt a familiar surge of pride at Marcus's characteristically practical response. The grant money would transform their financial situation, eliminating the constant worry about making ends meet and providing the security to plan for the future. But Marcus had never been driven by wealth for its own sake. His satisfaction came from building something lasting, something that served their community and provided good work for good people. The expansion plans had been Sarah's idea initially, born from her analysis of the garage's customer patterns and growth potential. She'd spent months researching grant programs, preparing applications, and developing business projections that demonstrated the viability of their expansion. Her administrative skills had evolved into genuine business acumen, and Marcus had come to rely on her insights about everything from pricing strategies to customer service improvements. "Mrs. Chun wants to bring her grandson's car in next week," Sarah continued, referring to the elderly woman who'd become one of their most loyal customers. "Apparently, he's finally admitted that strange noise isn't going to fix itself. The Honda Civic with the transmission issues?" Marcus asked. "I've been expecting that call for months." Their morning conversation was interrupted by Hope deciding that Marcus's coffee mug looked interesting enough to grab. Her small hands were surprisingly quick, and only Marcus's practiced reflexes prevented a caffeinated disaster. "Nice try, troublemaker," Marcus said, gently redirecting Hope's attention to the set of plastic keys he kept specifically for such moments. "These are much more fun to shake." Hope accepted the substitution with good grace, immediately beginning an enthusiastic percussion performance that filled the kitchen with cheerful noise. Tommy applauded her efforts, encouraging what he called her musical development, while Sarah made mental notes about child-proofing strategies they hadn't yet considered. The dynamics of their expanded family had settled into rhythms that felt both natural and miraculous. Tommy had embraced his role as big brother with characteristic enthusiasm, treating Hope as his personal responsibility and pride. He read to her every night, narrated their daily activities as if she were his eager student, and had appointed himself her primary entertainment coordinator. Marcus had revealed depths of patience and tenderness that sometimes caught Sarah off guard. She'd known he was a good father, Tommy was proof of that, but watching him with Hope had shown her different aspects of his character. The gentle way he rocked her to sleep, the silly songs he invented to make diaper changes more entertaining, the protective instinct that kicked in whenever she so much as stumbled while learning to walk. And Sarah had discovered within herself a capacity for love she'd never known existed. Not just for Hope, which had been immediate and overwhelming, but for this entire life they'd built together. She loved the morning chaos of getting everyone ready for their day, the evening routine of baths and stories and lullabies, the quiet moments when they sat together on the couch while the children played, simply enjoying each other's company. The professional success had been unexpected, but deeply satisfying. Under Sarah's management, the garage's reputation had grown steadily, word-of-mouth referrals bringing in customers from neighboring towns. She'd instituted customer service practices that went beyond fixing cars, following up after repairs, remembering personal details about regular customers, creating an atmosphere where people felt valued rather than just processed. "I should get down to the shop," Marcus said, glancing at the clock. "The Williams delivery truck is coming in early, and I want to get a good look at that engine before we quote the rebuild." "I'll be down in an hour," Sarah replied, beginning the familiar choreography of getting Hope ready for her day. "Tommy, remember your science project is due Friday. Do you need any help with the volcano?" "I've got it totally under control," Tommy assured her with the confidence of a 9-year-old who'd been planning his eruption strategy for weeks. "It's going to be epic. Hope's going to love watching it." Hope had indeed become Tommy's favorite audience for everything from homework presentations to bicycle trick attempts. She watched his every move with fascination, clapping at appropriate moments and providing the kind of unconditional admiration that every performer dreams of. After Marcus left for the garage and Tommy departed for school with his usual flurry of forgotten items and last-minute reminders, Sarah settled Hope in her playpen with a selection of favorite toys. The morning quiet that followed was something Sarah had learned to treasure, a chance to organize her thoughts and review the day's priorities before diving into the busy routine of managing both household and business responsibilities. The expansion grant represented more than just financial opportunity. It was validation of everything they'd built together, recognition that their unconventional family had created something valuable that deserved support and investment. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that her contributions had helped make this possible, that the skills she'd developed through necessity had become genuine expertise. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez reminding her about Hope's upcoming 18-month checkup. The appointment was routine, but Sarah felt the familiar flutter of anxiety that accompanied any medical visit. Hope had been healthy since birth, meeting all her developmental milestones with enthusiasm, but Sarah couldn't quite shake the protective hypervigilance that came from having experienced sudden devastating loss. She was updating the appointment calendar when the garage phone rang, the call forwarding to her line upstairs. The voice was unfamiliar, professional but warm, introducing himself as Robert Chun from the county's Economic Development Office. "I hope you don't mind me calling directly," Robert said. "I got your number from Janet Morrison at the Small Business Center. She's been telling everyone about the success you've had with Peterson's auto repair." Sarah felt a moment of disorientation at hearing her own surname spoken by a stranger. In the year and a half since the adoption, she'd grown accustomed to being Sarah Peterson, to belonging to the family that name represented. Hearing Chen in a different context brought back memories of her parents, of the life that had ended. "In flames and smoke. How can I help you?" Sarah managed, pushing aside the emotional disruption. "We're developing a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs in the region," Robert explained. "Pairing successful business owners with people who are just starting out, providing guidance and support for new ventures. Janet suggested you might be interested in participating as a mentor." The idea was intriguing, but also daunting. Sarah was still learning the business herself, still figuring out strategies and systems that worked. The thought of guiding others felt both flattering and overwhelming. "I'm not sure I'm qualified," Sarah said honestly. "I've only been doing this for a couple of years." "That's exactly what makes you valuable," Robert replied. "You've successfully navigated the challenges that new entrepreneurs face. You've built something sustainable and profitable in a competitive market. And you've done it all while managing personal circumstances that would have defeated many people. Sarah realized that word of her story had spread beyond their immediate community. The young woman who'd survived a devastating house fire, raised a child as a teenager, and helped transform a struggling business into a local success story. It was a narrative that apparently resonated with people looking for examples of resilience and determination. They scheduled a meeting for the following week to discuss the program in more detail. After hanging up, Sarah sat quietly for a moment, processing the unexpected opportunity. The scared, desperate girl who'd walked into Marcus's garage seemed like a different person now, someone from a story she'd heard rather than lived. Hope's babbling from the playpen brought Sarah back to the present. Her daughter had managed to stack 3 blocks into a precarious tower and was clearly proud of her architectural achievement. Sarah applauded enthusiastically, earning a beaming smile and an immediate attempt to build an even taller structure. The morning passed quickly. As Sarah worked through her administrative tasks while keeping one eye on Hope's increasingly creative play. The toddler had developed strong opinions about everything from which toys deserved her attention to what constituted an acceptable snack, and she wasn't shy about expressing those opinions with the full range of her vocal capabilities. By the time Sarah made her way down to the garage with Hope in tow, Marcus was already deep in conversation with the Williams delivery truck owner about the extensive engine rebuild that would be their biggest job of the month. Hope immediately toddled toward Marcus, her arms outstretched and her face bright with delight at being reunited with her favorite person. "There's my helper," Marcus said, scooping Hope up despite the grease on his hands. "Want to see what we're working on today?" Hope nodded seriously, as if she understood the importance of automotive diagnostics, while Marcus carried her toward the truck that dominated the center bay. Sarah watched them together, still marveling at the natural ease of their relationship. Marcus had never treated Hope differently because she wasn't biologically his child. From the moment she was born, he'd claimed her completely, loved her without reservation, protected her with the fierce devotion of any father. The garage had evolved to accommodate Hope's presence. Marcus had installed safety gates to keep her away from dangerous equipment, created a play area in the office where she could be entertained while still being supervised, and taught both Sarah and Tommy the importance of tool safety and chemical storage. Hope had learned early that the garage was a place of interesting sounds and smells, but also a place where certain rules had to be followed. "The engine's going to need a complete overhaul," Marcus explained to Sarah while Hope examined a harmless wrench with the focused attention of a scientist studying a new species. "At least 2 weeks of work, maybe 3 depending on what we find when we open it up. That'll put us right on schedule for the expansion," Sarah noted, mentally calculating timelines and cash flow. "By the time we finish this job, the new bay should be ready for equipment installation." They spent the next few hours working in comfortable parallel, Marcus focusing on the mechanical diagnosis while Sarah handled customer calls and parts orders. Hope alternated between playing in her designated area and toddling around to supervise everyone's work, offering her opinions through an elaborate system of pointing and babbling that Tommy claimed to understand perfectly. The lunch crowd brought a steady stream of customers, many of whom had become familiar faces over the past year. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with her Honda and a container of homemade tamales for the Peterson family. Mr. Williams stopped by to check on his truck's progress and ended up playing peekaboo with Hope while discussing the finer points of diesel engine maintenance. Sarah had come to love this aspect of their business, the way it connected them to their community, the relationships that developed through the simple act of providing reliable service. Customers trusted them not just with their vehicles, but with their stories, their worries, their celebrations. The garage had become a gathering place where people knew they'd be treated fairly and remembered personally. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you," Marcus called from the office around 2 o'clock. "Says her name is Linda Chun." Sarah felt her breath catch. The surname, combined with the unexpected nature of the visit, sent a chill through her despite the warm afternoon. She'd had no contact with extended family since the fire, partly because there hadn't been much extended family to contact, and partly because the grief and trauma had made reaching out feel impossible. The woman waiting in the office was probably in her 50s, with graying hair and features that bore a subtle resemblance to Sarah's own. She stood when Sarah entered, her expression a mixture of nervousness and determination that Sarah recognized from her own mirror. "I hope you don't mind me coming unannounced," Linda said. "I'm your father's cousin. I've been trying to find you for over a year." Sarah felt the familiar numbness that came with unexpected reminders of her parents, the automatic emotional shutdown that had helped her survive the worst period of her grief. Hope was napping in her portable crib in the corner of the office, and Sarah instinctively moved closer to her daughter, as if proximity could provide protection against the pain of memory. "I didn't know Dad had any living relatives," Sarah said carefully. "We lost touch years ago," Linda admitted. "Family disagreement that probably shouldn't have lasted as long as it did. But when I read about the fire in the paper, when I realized what happened to David and Michelle..." Her voice trailed off, emotion making it difficult to continue. Sarah waited, unsure what response was expected or appropriate. She'd spent so much energy building a new life, a new identity, that revisiting the past felt dangerous, like opening a door she'd deliberately sealed shut. "I should have found you sooner," Linda continued. "Should have been there when you needed family. I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now, and I wanted you to know that you're not alone. That you have family who cares about you." The words were kindly meant, but they felt hollow to Sarah. She wasn't alone. She had Marcus and Tommy and Hope, a family she'd chosen and that had chosen her in return. She'd built something beautiful from the ashes of loss, and she didn't need rescue or redemption from relatives who'd appeared years too late. "That's very kind," Sarah said politely, "but I'm not alone. I have a family." Linda's eyes moved to the sleeping toddler, taking in the obvious evidence of Sarah's life. "Of course. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I thought you might like to know about your father's side of the family. About where you come from." Before Sarah could respond, Tommy burst through the office door with his usual after-school energy, stopping short when he realized there was a stranger present. His protective instincts, finely tuned after years of being the man of the house, immediately activated. "Hi," he said politely but warily. "I'm Tommy Peterson. Are you here about car repair?" "This is Linda Chun," Sarah explained. "She's related to me. Linda, this is my brother Tommy." Tommy's expression brightened immediately at the word brother, his wariness replaced by curiosity. "Cool. Are you like Sarah's aunt or something? Do you want to see pictures of Hope? She's my baby sister, and she's basically the smartest baby ever born." Linda's surprise at Tommy's easy claim of family relationship was obvious, but she smiled at his enthusiasm. "I'd love to see pictures," she said genuinely. As Tommy launched into his extensive photo collection and detailed commentary about Hope's various achievements, Sarah found herself observing the interaction with detached interest. This was what belonging looked like, Tommy's immediate inclusion of her in their family narrative, his pride in Hope's accomplishments, his assumption that anyone related to Sarah would naturally want to celebrate the people they loved. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately providing Sarah with a sense of stability and support. He took in the scene quickly, recognizing Sarah's tension and Tommy's animated conversation with their unexpected visitor. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly, positioning himself close enough to Sarah to offer wordless reassurance. "Linda is my father's cousin," Sarah explained. "She's been looking for me since the fire." Marcus extended his hand to Linda with characteristic politeness. "Marcus Peterson. I'm Sarah's adoptive father and Tommy and Hope's dad." The introduction was deliberately clear, establishing the family structure without ambiguity. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude for his instinctive understanding of what she needed: protection without confrontation, support without drama. Linda shook Marcus's hand, clearly trying to process the unconventional family configuration she'd discovered. "I'm pleased to meet you. I had no idea Sarah had found such a loving home." "We found each other," Marcus corrected gently. "Sarah's been a blessing to our family." Hope chose that moment to wake from her nap, immediately seeking Sarah with the sleepy confusion of a toddler trying to orient herself in unfamiliar circumstances. Sarah lifted her daughter from the crib, feeling the solid weight of Hope's small body provide immediate comfort and grounding. "This is Hope," Sarah said, settling the toddler on her hip. "Hope, this is Linda. She's visiting today." Hope studied Linda with the frank assessment that toddlers brought to new people, then buried her face against Sarah's shoulder with the shy charm that melted hearts everywhere she went. "She's beautiful," Linda said softly. "She looks like you did at that age." The comparison to her younger self brought Sarah an unexpected pang of loss. Her parents would never see Hope, would never know the grandchild who might have inherited their smiles or their laugh. The life she'd built was wonderful, but it existed in the shadow of absence, shaped by the people who should have been there but weren't. They spent another half hour in careful conversation, Linda sharing memories of Sarah's father as a young man, Sarah providing polite but limited updates about her current life. The conversation felt surreal, like meeting a character from a book she'd read long ago and barely remembered. When Linda finally prepared to leave, she hesitated at the office door. "I'd like to stay in touch if that's all right. I know I can't replace the family you lost, and I can see you've built something beautiful here. But I'd like to be part of your life if you'll let me." Sarah felt Marcus's steady presence beside her, Tommy's curious attention, Hope's warm weight in her arms. This was her family, the people who'd chosen her and whom she'd chosen in return. But perhaps there was room for one more connection, one more thread linking her to the past while anchoring her in the present. "I'd like that," Sarah said, and meant it. After Linda left, the garage settled back into its familiar afternoon rhythm. Tommy helped Marcus organize tools while Sarah updated customer files, and Hope entertained herself with a collection of safe automotive supplies that had become her favorite toys. "You okay?" Marcus asked during a quiet moment, his concern evident, despite his casual tone. "I think so," Sarah replied honestly. "It was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Just a lot to process." "Family's complicated," Marcus observed, "even the ones we choose for ourselves." Sarah smiled at that, thinking about their own complex family history, especially the ones we choose for ourselves. That evening, after Tommy's homework was complete and Hope was settled in her high chair for dinner, Sarah found herself thinking about Linda's visit and what it meant for their family story. She'd spent so long focused on moving forward that she'd rarely looked back, rarely considered the value of preserving connections to her past. But watching Tommy help Hope with her dinner, listening to Marcus describe his plans for the garage expansion, feeling the contentment that came from being surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally, Sarah realized that she was strong enough now to hold both past and present. She could honor the memory of her parents while celebrating the life she'd built. She could acknowledge her loss while embracing her gains. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, noting her contemplative mood. "Just how far we've all come," Sarah said. "How much has changed since that first night I walked into your garage." "Best night of my life," Tommy declared around a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "That's when our real family started." Hope banged her spoon approvingly, adding her own commentary to Tommy's pronouncement, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of overwhelming love for these people who'd become her whole world. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and challenges and the everyday miracles of family life. The garage expansion would bring new opportunities and responsibilities. Hope would continue growing and learning, developing her own personality and dreams. Tommy would navigate the complexities of adolescence with his characteristic optimism and determination. And Sarah would be there for all of it, no longer the scared teenager who'd once thought she had nothing left to lose, but a woman who'd discovered that love could bloom in the most unexpected places, and that family was something you created with your choices, not just something you inherited through genetics. Looking around the dinner table at the faces that had become her whole world, Sarah felt a peace so complete it took her breath away. This was what happiness looked like, what security felt like, what belonging meant. And it was hers, built from ashes and sustained by love, as permanent and powerful as anything she could have imagined. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Hope's small sneakers as she ran ahead on the sidewalk, her 5-year-old energy boundless despite the early morning hour. Sarah watched her daughter navigate the familiar route to kindergarten with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path hundreds of times, stopping occasionally to examine interesting rocks or wave at neighbors working in their gardens. "Mama, look," Hope called, crouching beside a cluster of bright orange marigolds that had survived the first frost. "Mrs. Peterson's flowers are still pretty, even though it's getting cold." "They're hardy flowers," Sarah replied, catching up to her daughter and admiring the resilient blooms. "Some of the strongest things keep growing, even when conditions get difficult." Hope nodded seriously, filing away this piece of wisdom with the thoughtful consideration she brought to most adult observations. At 5, she possessed an emotional intelligence that sometimes startled Sarah, an ability to understand complex feelings and situations that seemed far beyond her years. The walk to school had become one of Sarah's favorite parts of each day, a quiet stretch of time when she and Hope could talk without the distractions of work or household responsibilities. These conversations ranged from Hope's elaborate theories about why leaves changed colors to her detailed plans for becoming a veterinarian astronaut teacher when she grew up. "Is today the day you find out about the big job?" Hope asked, skipping backwards for a few steps before turning around again. Sarah smiled at her daughter's ability to keep track of family business developments. "Today we find out if Peterson Automotive gets the contract with the city fleet. It would mean a lot. More work for everyone, including me?" Hope asked hopefully. She'd recently been promoted to official paper shredder and had taken the responsibility very seriously, creating elaborate confetti displays from outdated invoices and expired warranties. "Especially you," Sarah confirmed. "We'll need our best paper management specialist." The transformation of Peterson's Auto Repair into Peterson Automotive had been gradual but dramatic. What had started as a 2-bay garage serving neighborhood customers had evolved into a full-service automotive center with 6 service bays, a complete parts department, and contracts with several local businesses for fleet maintenance. Sarah's role had expanded along with the business. She now served as operations manager, overseeing everything from customer relations to employee scheduling to financial planning. The scared teenager who'd once asked for any kind of work had become an integral part of a thriving enterprise, her contributions recognized and valued by everyone from employees to customers to industry colleagues. The success hadn't come without challenges. Long hours, difficult customers, equipment failures, and the constant pressure of managing growth while maintaining quality had tested all of them. But they'd faced each obstacle as a family, supporting each other through stress and celebrating each victory together. Marcus had proven to be a natural leader, inspiring loyalty from their 8 employees through his combination of technical expertise and genuine care for their well-being. He'd created a workplace culture where everyone felt valued, where learning was encouraged, and where family obligations were respected and accommodated. Tommy, now 14, had found his own place within the family business. His afternoons were spent working alongside the mechanics, learning skills that would serve him whether he chose to continue in automotive repair, or pursue other interests. His natural curiosity and attention to detail had made him a valuable assistant, and several customers specifically requested him for routine maintenance work. But it was Hope who had become the heart of Peterson Automotive in ways no one had anticipated. Her presence had softened the sometimes intimidating atmosphere of an auto shop, making customers feel welcome and comfortable. She had an uncanny ability to remember personal details about regular clients, asking about their pets, their grandchildren, their upcoming vacations with genuine interest and impressive recall. They arrived at Riverside Elementary just as the first bell rang, joining the familiar crowd of parents and children navigating the morning drop-off routine. Hope hugged Sarah goodbye with the efficiency of someone who knew this was just the first of many hugs they'd share throughout the day, then ran toward the building where her teacher waited with the patient smile that had made kindergarten of a joy rather than an adjustment. Sarah watched until Hope disappeared into the classroom, then began the walk back to the automotive center. The route took her through the downtown area that had undergone significant revitalization in recent years, with new businesses opening alongside longtime establishments, creating a blend of tradition and innovation that reflected the community's growth. Peterson Automotive occupied a prominent corner location now, the original garage having expanded into adjacent buildings as their reputation and customer base grew. The sight of the business they'd built together still filled Sarah with pride and amazement. The professional signage, the organized service bays visible through large windows, the steady flow of customers arriving for scheduled appointments, it represented years of hard work and careful planning. Marcus was already deep in conversation with the city fleet manager when Sarah arrived, both men standing beside a maintenance truck that had seen better days. The potential contract they were discussing would be their largest yet, providing regular service for the entire municipal vehicle fleet in exchange for a guaranteed monthly revenue that would ensure their financial stability for years to come. The previous contractor left us in a difficult position, the fleet manager was explaining. Delayed service, overcharges, poor communication. We need a partner who understands that city vehicles can't afford extended downtime. That's exactly our strength, Marcus replied confidently. Quick turnaround, transparent pricing, and proactive maintenance that prevents major breakdowns. Sarah can show you our scheduling system and customer satisfaction data. Sarah stepped forward, extending her hand to the fleet manager with the professional confidence she'd developed through years of client interactions. Mr. Davidson, I have the documentation you requested ready for review. Our average service time, customer retention rates, and cost comparisons with regional competitors. The presentation that followed showcased everything they'd learned about running a successful automotive business. Sarah walked Mr. Davidson through their systematic approach to fleet management, their investment in diagnostic equipment, their commitment to continuing education for all technicians, and their track record of completing work on schedule and within budget. Impressive operation, Mr. Davidson acknowledged, reviewing the comprehensive portfolio Sarah had prepared. Your customer testimonials are particularly compelling. Mrs. Rodriguez says you've been maintaining her delivery trucks for 3 years, without a single breakdown that affected her business operations. Mrs. Rodriguez was one of our first commercial clients, Marcus explained. We learned early that reliable service isn't just about fixing problems, it's about preventing them from happening in the first place. The discussion continued for another hour, covering everything from warranty policies to emergency response procedures. Sarah found herself answering detailed questions about inventory management and parts sourcing, drawing on knowledge she'd accumulated through years of hands-on experience and continuous learning. When Mr. Davidson finally departed with promises to have a decision within the week, Marcus and Sarah stood together in the customer waiting area, both feeling the mixture of hope and nervous anticipation that accompanied any significant business opportunity. Think we got it? Marcus asked, watching the city truck disappear down the street. I think we presented ourselves exactly as we are, Sarah replied. Professional, reliable, and committed to quality. Whether that's what they're looking for, we'll know soon enough. Tommy emerged from the service bay where he'd been helping with an oil change, his coveralls bearing the honest stains of productive work. At 14, he'd grown tall and lean, his features beginning to show hints of the man he would become, while retaining the open curiosity that had characterized him since childhood. How'd the presentation go? He asked, washing his hands at the industrial sink they'd installed specifically for employees transitioning between dirty and clean work. Well, I think, Marcus replied. Mr. Davidson seemed impressed with our setup and our track record. Cool. Hey, Hope called the office phone to remind everyone that her class play is Thursday afternoon. She wanted to make sure nobody forgets. Sarah smiled at this reminder of Hope's theatrical debut. Their 5-year-old had been cast as a sunflower in the kindergarten production of The Garden Friends, a role she'd been rehearsing with dramatic flair for weeks. The entire Peterson automotive team had been invited to attend, and Hope had made it clear that she expected a substantial cheering section. Did you tell her we'd all be there? Sarah asked. Of course. I also told her that Carlos is making the special banner for the occasion. She was very pleased about the banner situation. Carlos Mendoza had joined their team 2 years earlier as a junior mechanic and had quickly become both a valued employee and a beloved member of their extended family. His artistic talents had transformed their waiting area with colorful murals depicting automotive themes, and he'd volunteered to create promotional materials for special events with the enthusiasm of someone who understood that work could be both productive and creative. The afternoon brought its usual mix of scheduled appointments and walk-in customers, keeping everyone busy until closing time. Sarah moved between the office and the service area, coordinating parts deliveries, updating customer records, and handling the administrative tasks that kept the business running smoothly. She'd learned to read the rhythms of the garage, understanding when Marcus needed space to focus on a particularly challenging diagnosis, and when he appreciated having someone to bounce ideas off. Their working relationship had evolved into an intuitive partnership where each could anticipate the other's needs and provide support without being asked. The Hendersons are here for their truck, Maria called from the customer service desk. Maria Gonzalez had started as their receptionist 3 years earlier and had gradually taken on increasing responsibilities as their customer base grew. Her bilingual abilities and natural empathy had made her invaluable for building relationships with their diverse clientele. Sarah reviewed the Henderson file quickly, noting the transmission work that had been completed that morning along with the routine maintenance Marcus had recommended. The ability to handle multiple services during a single visit was part of what distinguished Peterson Automotive from their competitors, and customers appreciated the efficiency of comprehensive care. Mr. Henderson, your truck is ready, Sarah announced, walking into the waiting area where the elderly farmer sat reading an automotive magazine. Marcus found the transmission issue we discussed, and we've also completed the oil change and tire rotation you requested. That was quick work, Mr. Henderson noted approvingly. How much do I owe you? The transaction proceeded smoothly, with Mr. Henderson expressing the kind of satisfaction that led to referrals and repeat business. As he drove away in his well-maintained truck, Sarah felt the quiet pride that came from work done well and customers served honestly. By 6 o'clock, the last customer had departed, and the team began the closing routine that ensured everything would be ready for the next day's work. Tools were cleaned and returned to their designated places. Service bays were swept and organized, and the cash register was balanced and secured. Sarah was updating the daily sales report when her phone buzzed with a text from Hope's after-school program coordinator. Hope has been asking all afternoon when you're coming to pick her up. She has something very important to tell you about her rehearsal today." The message brought a smile to Sarah's face and a familiar tug of maternal affection. Hope's enthusiasm for sharing the details of her day was infectious, and Sarah had learned to give these conversations the attention they deserved. At 5, every experience was potentially earth-shaking in its significance, and Hope's dramatic retellings could transform mundane events into epic adventures. "I'm heading out to get Hope," Sarah called to Marcus, who was reviewing tomorrow's schedule with Carlos and Tommy. "She apparently has major news about rehearsal. Probably figured out how to make her sunflower costume even more spectacular." Marcus suggested, "See you at home." The drive to Hope's after-school program took Sarah through residential neighborhoods where Halloween decorations were beginning to appear in front yards and windows. The holiday had become one of Hope's favorites, not just for the candy, but for the creative possibilities it represented. This year, she'd announced her intention to be a scientist sunflower, combining her costume requirements with her current fascination with laboratory equipment. Hope was waiting by the door when Sarah arrived, practically vibrating with excitement and clutching a construction paper creation that appeared to involve significant amounts of glitter and pipe cleaners. "Mama, Mama, you have to see what we made today." And Mrs. Peterson said my sunflower voice projection is excellent, which means I'm talking loud enough for everyone to hear. And Jake forgot his lines again, but I helped him remember because that's what good castmates do. The enthusiastic narration continued throughout the drive home, with Hope providing detailed analysis of every aspect of rehearsal from costume adjustments to choreography modifications. Sarah listened with the focused attention that Hope's stories deserved, asking questions that encouraged elaboration and celebrating each small triumph with appropriate enthusiasm. "And the best part," Hope concluded as they pulled into their driveway, "is that tomorrow we get to practice with the real microphones, so everyone in the whole auditorium will be able to hear us perfectly." The house they'd moved into 3 years earlier reflected the success of Peterson Automotive and the stability of their family life. It was a modest but comfortable 2-story home with a large backyard where Hope could play safely and Tommy could work on his various mechanical projects. Sarah had insisted on a dedicated office space where she could handle business paperwork without interrupting family time, and Marcus had converted the garage into a workshop where he could pursue restoration projects that combined his professional skills with personal passion. Tommy was already home, his homework spread across the kitchen table alongside what appeared to be the components of a small engine that he was rebuilding as part of his automotive technology class. The combination of academic work and hands-on learning suited his learning style perfectly, and his grades had improved dramatically once he'd found subjects that engaged his natural curiosity. "How's the engine coming along?" Sarah asked, admiring the organized array of parts and tools. "Really good. Dad helped me identify the problem with the carburetor, and I think I can have it running by the weekend. Want to see how the compression chamber works?" Hope immediately abandoned her backpack in favor of examining her brother's project, asking questions that demonstrated her growing understanding of mechanical principles. Tommy patiently explained each component's function with the expertise of someone who'd grown up surrounded by automotive knowledge, and Hope listened with the rapt attention she brought to all educational opportunities. Marcus arrived home shortly after Sarah finished helping Hope with her kindergarten homework, bringing with him the satisfaction of a productive day and the quiet exhaustion that came from physical work well done. The routine of family dinner had become one of their most treasured traditions, a time when everyone shared their daily experiences and planned for upcoming activities. "Mr. Davidson called just before I left," Marcus announced as they gathered around the dinner table. "We got the city contract. They want to start with a trial period servicing their light truck fleet, with the possibility of expanding to include all municipal vehicles if everything goes well." The news brought immediate celebration from the entire family. Tommy pumped his fist in triumph. Hope clapped her hands and demanded details about what this meant for the business. And Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief at the recognition of their hard work and professionalism. "This is huge," Sarah said, already mentally calculating the implications for their revenue projections and staffing needs. "We'll need to hire at least 2 more mechanics and probably expand our parts inventory significantly." "Already thinking ahead," Marcus observed with approval. "That's why we make such a good team." The conversation that followed covered everything from celebration plans to logistical challenges, with each family member contributing ideas and suggestions based on their unique perspectives and areas of expertise. Hope's suggestion that they should have a party with a cake shaped like a city truck was enthusiastically endorsed by everyone, while Tommy's more practical proposals about workflow optimization demonstrated his growing understanding of business operations. Later that evening, after Hope was tucked into bed with her usual collection of stuffed animals and bedtime stories, Sarah found herself standing in the office, reviewing the day's accomplishments and planning for tomorrow's responsibilities. The city contract represented not just financial success, but validation of everything they'd built together. Marcus appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk with the comfortable ease of someone who belonged exactly where he was. "Thinking about the new hiring timeline?" he asked, noting the spreadsheets open on Sarah's computer. "Among other things," Sarah replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Also thinking about how far we've all come. Remember when your biggest worry was making rent on this place?" Marcus smiled at the memory. "Seems like a lifetime ago." "Different people, different problems, different dreams." "Better dreams," Sarah corrected. "Dreams big enough to include everyone we love." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment of success and security. The scared teenager who'd once begged for any kind of work had become a confident business manager whose skills were respected throughout their industry. The struggling single father had built something lasting and valuable that would provide security for his family for years to come. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Marcus said eventually. "What?" "That we did all this without losing sight of what really matters. The business is successful, but we're still the same family when we started. Still taking care of each other, still making time for what's important." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Success could change people, could shift priorities in ways that damaged relationships and compromised values. But their growth had been steady and intentional, always guided by their commitment to each other and to the principles that had brought them together. "Hope asked me yesterday if we'd always be a family," Sarah said. "I told her that families who choose each other are the strongest kind, because the choice gets made new every day." Smart answer. Think she understood it? I think she understands. That she's loved unconditionally by people who will always put her welfare first. The philosophical details can wait until she's older. Marcus laughed at that, then grew more serious. "Speaking of philosophical details, I've been thinking about something. About making some changes that would reflect how our family has evolved." Sarah looked up from her coffee, noting the thoughtful expression that meant Marcus had been considering something important for a while before bringing it up. "What kind of changes?" "Legal changes. I'd like to adopt you officially as my daughter, not just as a foster placement. And I'd like us to consider changing Hope's last name to Peterson, so she has the same name as the rest of her family." The suggestion caught Sarah completely off guard, even though it made perfect sense given their family dynamics. The adoption she'd gone through as a pregnant teenager had been a practical necessity, a way to provide stability and legal protection during a vulnerable time. But it had also been a genuine expression of belonging, a recognition that they'd chosen each other as family. Now, 5 years later, Marcus was offering to make that choice even more explicit, to formalize in law what had always been true in their hearts. "You'd really want to do that?" Sarah asked, emotion making her voice unsteady. Sarah, you've been my daughter in every way that matters for years now. The paperwork would just catch up with reality. And Hope deserves to have the same last name as the brother she adores, and the grandfather who reads her bedtime stories every night. The title grandfather was new, something Hope had started using spontaneously as she'd grown old enough to understand family relationships more clearly. Marcus had embraced the role with characteristic warmth, and Hope's obvious affection for him had deepened their bond in ways that delighted everyone who witnessed their interactions. What does Tommy think about all this? Sarah asked. Tommy suggested it, Marcus admitted with a grin. Said it was weird that we were officially a family, but didn't all have the same name. He's got a point. Sarah felt tears starting, the emotional overwhelm that came with unexpected kindness and recognition. After years of building their life together one day at a time, the idea of making their family bond legally permanent felt like both a natural next step and a profound milestone. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. I can't think of anything I'd want more. The conversation that followed covered practical details and emotional implications, but the essential decision had been made with the kind of certainty that characterized all their best choices. They would formalize what everyone already knew, that they were a family bound not by genetics, but by love, commitment, and the daily choice to support each other through whatever challenges life might bring. The next few months passed quickly as they navigated the legal processes involved in family name changes and formal adoptions, while simultaneously managing the increased demands of their expanding business. The city contract had led to additional commercial opportunities, and Peterson Automotive was gaining recognition as one of the most reliable automotive service providers in the region. Sarah found herself featured in a local business magazine article about successful young entrepreneurs, a recognition that still felt surreal despite her years of professional accomplishment. The photograph showed her standing in front of Peterson Automotive, wearing the confident smile of someone who'd found her place in the world and made the most of it. Hope's kindergarten graduation arrived with the pomp and ceremony that elementary schools brought to such occasions, complete with tiny caps and gowns and a program featuring each child's future career aspirations. Hope had announced her intention to become a business owner who fixes cars and helps families, a goal that brought tears to Sarah's eyes and pride to everyone who heard it. Tommy completed his freshman year of high school with grades that reflected his newfound academic confidence and clear sense of direction. His automotive technology instructor had praised his technical skills and recommended him for an advanced placement program that would allow him to earn college credit while completing high school. The formal adoption ceremony took place on a warm June morning in the same courthouse where Sarah had first become a Peterson. This time, however, the proceedings felt like celebration rather than necessity, a joyful recognition of bonds that had been forged through years of shared experience and mutual support. Hope, now officially Hope Peterson, sat between her mother and grandfather, wearing her best dress and the serious expression she brought to all important occasions. When the judge pronounced their family legally complete, Hope clapped her hands and announced to the entire courtroom that this was the best day ever in the history of days. Tommy, now legally Sarah's brother rather than just her chosen family member, grinned and hugged everyone within reach. At 15, he'd grown into a confident young man who understood the value of the unconventional family they'd created together and took pride in the love and support that had made their success possible. Marcus, now officially Sarah's adoptive father-in-law as well as in heart, looked around the courtroom with the satisfaction of someone who'd kept every promise he'd ever made to the people he loved most. And Sarah, now Sarah Peterson in every legal sense, felt the complete peace that came from belonging fully and permanently to people who'd chosen her just as she'd chosen them. The celebration lunch that followed took place at their favorite family restaurant, with Hope providing detailed commentary about the legal proceedings, and Tommy offering thoughtful observations about the significance of names and identity. The conversation was punctuated by laughter and interrupted by frequent expressions of affection, the natural rhythm of a family that had learned to treasure every ordinary moment. As they walked back to their cars after lunch, Hope slipped her hand into Sarah's and looked up with the serious expression that usually preceded her most profound observations. "Mama," she said thoughtfully, "now that we all have the same name, does that mean we'll be together forever?" Sarah knelt down to Hope's eye level, meeting her daughter's gaze with the complete honesty their relationship deserved. "It means we've promised to choose each other forever," Sarah explained. "Even when things get difficult, even when we disagree about things, even when life brings us challenges we haven't faced before, we've promised to be a family no matter what happens." Hope nodded seriously, filing away this information with the careful attention she brought to all matters of importance. "Good," she said with satisfaction, "because I like our family exactly the way it is." As they drove home together, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment of complete belonging. The scared teenager, who'd once thought she'd lost everything, had discovered that love could create something even more beautiful than what had been destroyed. The struggling single father had built a legacy that would benefit not just his own children, but the entire community they served. Together, they'd proven that families were defined not by blood or circumstance, but by the daily choice to show up for each other, to support each other's dreams, and to create something lasting and meaningful from whatever raw materials life provided. Peterson Automotive continued to thrive, providing not just automotive services but employment, opportunities for skilled workers, and a gathering place for community members who appreciated honest dealing and reliable service. The business had become a source of pride for the entire neighborhood, proof that hard work and integrity could build something valuable and enduring. Hope grew into a confident child who understood that she was cherished by everyone in her family and supported in all her ambitious dreams. Her natural leadership abilities and empathetic nature suggested she would indeed grow up to help families, whether through automotive service or any other path she chose to pursue. Tommy developed into a young man whose technical skills were matched by his understanding of responsibility and community service. His future was bright with possibilities, but his foundation was solid with the love and support of a family who believed in his potential and celebrated his achievements. Marcus found in his expanded family the fulfillment he'd always sought but never quite achieved. His role as father, grandfather, and business owner provided him with multiple sources of satisfaction and pride, and his legacy was secure in the lives he'd helped to shape and the community he'd helped to strengthen. And Sarah discovered that strength came not from surviving tragedy alone, but from building something beautiful with the people who chose to stand beside you through whatever challenges life might bring. She'd become not just a survivor, but a creator, not just a recipient of kindness, but a source of it, not just someone who'd been rescued, but someone who'd learned to provide shelter for others. Their story was proof that the most powerful families were often the ones that chose each other, that love could bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, and that the courage to trust again after devastating loss could lead to joy beyond anything previously imagined. As the sun set over Peterson Automotive that evening, casting long shadows across the service bays where tomorrow's work waited, the Peterson family gathered for their usual evening routine of dinner, homework, and shared conversation. The sounds of their laughter and affection drifted through the windows, evidence of the love that had transformed a desperate moment into a lasting legacy of hope and belonging. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.